In 2019, the average production of crude oil in the Arab countries reached 25 million barrels per day. A small part of this production was consumed locally, while the bulk is exported abroad. And considering the almost constant volume of oil reserves in the Arab countries and the scarcity of major oil discoveries in recent years, there is a logical question. When will crude oil run out if production continues at current rates? In order to answer this question, it is necessary to have an art background and some technical details of the oil industry. For example, what is the current size of proven oil reserves? And what is the difference between proven, probable, and possible oil reserves? And why can oil companies dispense with wells despite the presence of large quantities in them? And how is oil discovered at all? And why has the pace of oil discoveries slowed down in recent years? And the most important question is, why are there differences between expectations and the expiration date of oil? I'm Chakid Chaban. Welcome to a new episode of Money Talks. In May 2021, Rystad Energy released a very important analysis, which says that the reserves of the major oil companies will run out after 15 years, and thus simply because the reserves of these companies are being depleted at a very large pace. In 2020, the 6 largest oil companies in the world, ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, Chevron, Total, and Eni, extracted 13 billion barrels of oil equivalent, which is equal to 15% of its proven reserves. So what are the proven reserves? Before answering this question, let us first know what oil is, how it is formed, how it is extracted, and why it will be over one day. Oil is the most abundant liquid in the Earth's crust after water. This fluid is the result of the decomposition of organisms that were buried in the ground. Over the years, millions of tons of sediment were formed over it, and under the influence of high temperatures and extreme pressure, these organisms turned into oil. And oil is a non-renewable resource. Oil discovery and commercial refining began in the latter half of the 19th century, and considering the increase in demand and production, the volume of oil discoveries reached its peak in the 1960s. Since then, the number of these discoveries has been declining. Now, how is oil discovered and how are oil reserves estimated? Geologists first identify a specific area in which they suspect the presence of oil or gas. This is based on some geological evidence, and in order to be sure, they use seismic tomography. And if the results of these experiments are encouraging, the company will drill a so-called exploration well. And in the case of the presence of oil, the most difficult stage begins. It is to determine the size and dimensions of the oil tank. This is done using a combination of techniques and calculations, which enables them to reach estimates of the amount of oil in the area. However, these estimates are usually approximate, not 100% accurate. The estimated reserves are not in the same category. It is divided into proven reserves, probable reserves, and possible reserves. And this division depends on the percentage of the possibility of extracting the oil commercially. And petroleum engineers believe that the best measure for oil companies is their proven and probable reserves. Proven reserves of crude oil in the world are around 1,252 billion barrels, and the share of Arab countries from these reserves is 715 billion barrels. And that brings us to the main question of the episode: when will these reserves be exhausted? The answer to this question is usually through the ratio of the volume of reserves to production, which is simply the division of the volume of proven reserves by the rate of production. And if we apply this process to the numbers we have, we will find that global reserves will be over within 35 years, and the Arab reserves will be over within 80 years. But this computational method is not effective because it does not consider 3 important factors. First is the inaccuracy of the confirmed reserves figures. There are intentional and unintended deviations in it. In 2004, the Shell company faced a wave of attacks when it turns out she tampered with their backup data. Second is the development of technology and methods of extraction. There is something called non-recoverable oil. It is in the oil and oil reservoirs that the current methods of extraction cannot extract, but these methods are constantly evolving. The third factor that the computational methods does not take into account is the volume of new oil discoveries. even if they are relatively small, especially in pristine places. Another important factor is the assumption of constant production levels. The level of production is a reflection of the level of consumption, but in recent years there have been developments indicating that production levels will soon reach a peak. But regardless of the accuracy of the predictions of the end of oil, the proven fact is that the oil will run out and everyone must prepare for this. At the global level, there are more than 25 countries whose economies depend entirely or to a large extent on oil. That is why these countries must diversify their economies. As always, I have a question for you. What is the best economic option in which countries can invest after oil? I will wait for your answers in the comments. See you in the next episode.